Clear the deck! Clear the deck! Hook is engaged! Move in!
The atmosphere inside the cockpit of the F-35 Lightning II is not one of adrenaline-fueled chaos, but of a terrifyingly cold, synthetic omniscience, a digital silence where the roar of the single Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine, the most powerful fighter engine ever built, is merely a background hum to the symphony of data flooding the pilot's senses. This is not the dogfighting of the 20th century, where sweat-drenched aviators wrestled hydraulic controls and craned their necks to spot a glimmer of sun off an enemy wing. This is warfare conducted from the heart of a flying supercomputer, a machine that sees everything, hears everything, and shares everything before the enemy even knows the sky is turned against them. To understand the F-35 is to understand that the plane itself is almost secondary to the invisible web it weaves, a trillion-dollar phantom that has transcended the physical limits of aerodynamics to become a node in a lethal global consciousness. The story of this weapon is not just about metal and stealth coating. It is a saga of crippling development pains, political firestorms, and a combat debut that has quietly, methodically, rewritten the rules of air superiority in the 21st century. Imagine the sensation of strapping into a seat where the instrument panel is virtually non-existent, replaced by a panoramic touchscreen that looks more like a spacecraft's interface than a fighter jet's controls. But the true magic lies in the helmet, a $400,000 piece of carbon fiber and electronics that fits custom-molded to the pilot's skull. When the visor comes down, the cockpit dissolves. If the pilot looks down, they do not see their knees or the floor of the jet, but the clouds thousands of feet below, or the dark waters of the ocean, or the sprawling city lights of a target zone. Because the distributed aperture system, 6 high-resolution, infrared cameras distributed around the airframe stitches together a seamless 360-degree view of the world, projected directly onto the pilot's retina. This is the God's eye view, a capability that allows a pilot to look directly through the floor of their aircraft, to target a tank moving in an alleyway 20,000 feet below, or to look over their shoulder and see a missile launch that hasn't even registered on traditional radar yet. In the early days, this technology was the subject of mockery, a symbol of the program's bloated budget and technical overreach. But in the skies over Syria and the mountains of Afghanistan, it became the difference between guessing and knowing, between life and death. The narrative of the F-35 cannot be told without acknowledging the Adir, the Hebrew name given to the F-35I variants flown by the Israeli Air Force, a name that translates to mighty one, and it was here, in the volatile airspace of the Middle East, that the Lightning II first tasted blood. In May 2018, the world watched in stunned silence as the commander of the Israeli Air Force revealed that the F-35 had not only flown operationally, but had already struck targets on 2 different fronts, making Israel the first nation to use the stealth fighter in combat. The mission details remain shrouded in the heavy classification of state secrets, but the implications were deafening. The Adir had slipped into arguably the most heavily defended airspace on the planet, Syria bristling with advanced Russian S-300 and S-400 surface-to-air missile batteries, and had struck Iranian targets with impunity. The Russian radars, touted as the ultimate counter to American stealth, remained silent, or perhaps they saw something, a ghost on the screen that flickered and vanished before a firing solution could be locked, leaving the operators confused, until the explosions began. This was the moment the critics fell silent. The moment the paper plane with the troubled development history proved that it could walk through walls. But the drama of the F-35 is not limited to the high-tech wizardry of the Israeli Air Force. It extends to the gritty, dust-choked mountains of Afghanistan, where the United States Marine Corps took the F-35B, a short takeoff and vertical landing variant, into the fray for the first time in September 2018, launching from the deck of the USS Essex, an amphibious assault ship that looks like a small aircraft carrier but operates with the scrappy ethos of the Marines. The F-35Bs roared into the sky, not with the aid of a catapult, but with the raw, directed thrust of their engines, defying gravity in a display of brute force and engineering elegance. These pilots were not hunting advanced enemy fighters or dodging sophisticated radar networks. They were supporting ground troops, Marines and special operators pinned down in the treacherous terrain below. The F-35B, often criticized for having a shorter range range and smaller payload than its Air Force cousin, proved its worth by being right there with the fleet, a floating airbase that could park off the coast and deliver precision ordnance on demand. The first strike was against a fixed Taliban target, a moment of historic significance that marked the transition of the jump jet legacy from the venerable Harrier to the stealth age, proving that the Marines could bring fifth-generation power to the most remote corners of the map without needing a mile-long concrete runway. The tension of the F-35's story escalated dramatically in the chilly waters of the South China Sea. In January 2022, when an F-35C, the carrier-based variant designed for the harsh brutality of catapult launches and arrested landings, struck the ramp of the USS Carl Vinson, the crash was violent and chaotic, a terrifying skid of burning composite and metal that sent the $100 million aircraft careening off the deck and into the dark, unforgiving ocean. The pilot ejected, surviving the ordeal, but the nightmare had only just begun for the US Navy, because the wreckage of their most advanced fighter was now sitting at the bottom of international waters, a prize of incalculable value to any adversary who could reach it first. What followed was a silent, desperate race against time and geography, a high-stakes maritime thriller played out beneath the waves as Chinese salvage vessels reportedly began moving toward the area, their intentions unspoken but clearly understood. The US Navy had to maintain a constant vigil over the crash site, a circle of destroyers and surveillance aircraft guarding a patch of empty ocean while deep-sea recovery teams were mobilized from halfway around the world. The recovery of that aircraft from a depth of 12,400 feet was not just a salvage operation. It was a denial of intelligence, a frantic effort to prevent the secrets of the F-35's radar-absorbent materials and engine geometry from falling into the hands of Beijing, a dramatic reminder that the technology of the Lightning II is so valuable that nations are willing to risk collision and conflict just to steal a glimpse of its shattered remains, while the recovery in the South China Sea played out like a spy novel. The Skies Over the Red Sea provided a different kind of drama, one of intercept and defense against a new era of aerial threats. In late 2023, as tensions in the Middle East boiled over, the F-35I Adir once again made history, this time not by dropping bombs, but by shielding the skies. The Israeli Defense Forces released footage of an F-35 tracking and engaging a cruise missile, a slow-moving but lethal threat launched by Houthi rebels in Yemen. The interception was clinical, a display of the F-35's ability to act as a defensive sentinel, using its advanced AESA radar to lock onto a small, low-flying target against the clutter of the ground attacks that baffles all the radar. Dispatch it with a precision air-to-air missile. This was a revelation. The F-35 was not just a strike fighter, it was an airborne Aegis cruiser, a defensive shield capable of protecting cities and fleets from the proliferation of drone swarms and cruised missiles that characterized modern asymmetric warfare. The pilot in that engagement didn't just see a blip. Their helmet likely outlined the cruise missile in a red box, calculated its trajectory, projected the intercept point, and essentially guided the pilot's hand to the kill switch, merging human reflexed with machine calculation in a loop of terrifying efficiency. The sheer scale of the F-35 program creates a gravity well that pulls in every ally and partner, creating a global network that is unmatched in history. When a British F-35B takes off from the HMS Queen Elizabeth, it is not flying alone. It is speaking the same digital language as an American F-35A launching from a base in Utah, or a Japanese F-35 patrolling the East China Sea. This capability, known as the Multifunction Advanced Data Link (MADL), allows these aircraft to share data without breaking stealth, whispering to each other in narrow, directed beams of energy that enemy electronic warfare systems cannot detect or jam. In training exercises like Red Flag, this has led to scenarios where blue Air Forces flying F-35s completely dismantle red air aggressors who never even saw them coming. Veteran pilots of the F-15 and F-16, masters of the dogfight, have described the experience of flying against the F-35 as fighting a ghost. They are targeted, locked, and killed before their own sensors pick up a whisper of a threat. The drama here is psychological. It is the terror of the unknown, the realization that the era of the turning fight, of the Top Gun-style maneuvering, is being replaced by a cold, distant execution where the pilot with the best sensors wins before the merge even happens. Yet, for all its prowess, the F-35 remains a machine. And machines are subject to the unforgiving laws of physics and the unpredictability of failure. The loss of a Japanese F-35A in 2019, which plunged into the Pacific at high speed, killing the pilot, was a somber reminder of the risks involved in pushing the envelope of human and mechanical performance. The pilot, an experienced veteran, likely suffered from spatial disorientation, a condition where the inner ear betrays the brain and up becomes down, a fatal illusion in the pitch-black void over the ocean. In that tragic moment, all the sensor fusion and advanced avionics could not save the human element from its own biological limitations. It underscored the fragility of the man in the machine, the single point of failure in a system designed for perfection. These incidents, while tragic, add a layer of human stakes to the technological marvel. They remind us that inside the 40,000-pound stealth fighter, wrapped in radar-absorbent skin and powered by 43,000 pounds of thrust, is a person, breathing processed oxygen, their heart rate spiked, operating on the razor's edge of endurance and skill. The operational tempo of the F-35 has accelerated wildly, moving from a tentative introduction to a ubiquitous presence on the front lines of NATO's eastern flank. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, American and Allied F-35s were deployed to forward bases in Eastern Europe, flying patrols along the border that served as a high-tech show of force. These were not combat missions in the kinetic sense, no. Missiles were fired, but they were battles of information. The F-35s effectively vacuumed up the electronic order of battle of the Russian military, their sensors detecting and classifying the radar signatures of surface-to-air missile sites deep inside Belarus and Russia. Every time a Russian radar operator turned on their system to scan for threats, an F-35 patrolling hundreds of miles away likely catalogued the frequency, the location, and the type of radar, feeding that data back into the NATO intelligence network. This is the electronic vacuum cleaner role of the jet, a capability that allows it to win wars before they start by building a comprehensive map of the enemy's defenses, a map that would be used to blind and dismantle those defenses in the first hour of a shooting war. The Russian pilots, flying their Su-35s and Su-57s on the other side of the border, knew the F-35s were there, but they couldn't track them consistently. A frustrating game of cat and mouse, where the mouse is invisible and carrying a sledgehammer. One of the most dramatic, yet underreported aspects of the F-35's career is its role in the suppression of enemy air defenses SEAD, a mission profile known as the Wild Weasel. Historically, this was a suicide mission, requiring pilots to fly directly into the teeth of enemy anti-aircraft, fired to bait radars into turning on so they could be destroyed. The F-35 changes this dynamic entirely. Instead of acting as bait, the Lightning II acts as a sniper. In simulated battles, F-35s have demonstrated the ability to slip through the gaps in a radar network, locate the command and control nodes, and sever the head of the enemy defense system with a precision glide bomb, all while the enemy operators are still scanning the skies for non-stealthy targets. This capability was hinted at during the tensions with Iran, where F-35s were deployed to the region as a subtle threat, a message that the airspace over Tehran was not as secure as the regime believed. The psychological impact of a weapon that can be anywhere and nowhere simultaneously cannot be overstated. It forces adversaries to spend billions on counter-stealth technologies, radars, and interceptors, bleeding their economies in a futile attempt to catch a shadow. The story of the F-35 is also a story of industrial drama, of a production line in Fort Worth, Texas, that stretches for a mile, a cathedral of high-tech manufacturing where parts from all over the world converge. The fuselage comes from Northrop Grumman, the tail from BAE Systems in the UK, the wings from Lockheed Martin, all coming together in a dance of logistics that rivals the complexity of the jet itself. This global supply chain was designed to bulletproof the program against political cancellation. By spreading the jobs and the technology across a dozen partner nations, the F-35 became too big to fail. This strategy, while cynical to some, ensured that the Lightning II would become the standard fighter for the entire Western world. We see the fruits of this now as nations like Finland, Switzerland, and Germany, countries with vastly different defense needs, all line up to buy the jet, recognizing that in a world of hypersonic missiles and AI-driven warfare, second place is just the first loser. The drama of the boardroom, of the heated congressional hearings where generals were grilled over cost overruns, has given way to the drama of the export market, where the F-35 is the undisputed king, a geopolitical chess piece that Washington grants only to its most trusted allies. There was a specific incident that highlights the eerie capabilities of the F-35's electronic warfare suite, a moment that borders on science fiction. During a red flag exercise, an F-35 pilot reportedly used the jet's APG-81 radar not just to track an enemy fighter, but to jam its sensors with a high-power beam of electronic noise, effectively blinding the opponent. The enemy pilot, flying a fourth-generation fighter, found their radar screen washed out with static, their targeting pod wandering aimlessly, their communications cut. They were flying a perfectly good aircraft that had been lobotomized by an invisible adversary. This non-kinetic kill is the future of air combat, where the battle is won in the electromagnetic spectrum long before a missile leaves the rail. They just needed to point the nose of the jet and flip a switch, turning the enemy's avionics into useless junk. It is a terrifying evolution of warfare, a dramatic shift from the chivalric, if bloody, dogfights of the past. Consider the sheer logistical audacity of the elephant walk demonstrations. This is not just a photo opportunity. It is a signal of mass, a demonstration that the stealth fleet is not a boutique force of hangar queens, but a deployable armada. It represented more combat power than the entire air forces of many nations. The ground shook, the air smelled of jet fuel and ozone, and the message was clear. The swarm is here. The drama of these events lies in the implication of what happens when those 52 jets disappear into the clouds. They disperse, they go silent, and they become a net. 52 F-35s can effectively monitor and control the airspace of an entire country. They become a hive mind, a collective intelligence that is impossible to surprise and incredibly difficult to kill. The combat record of the F-35 is still being written, and while it is yet to face a peer adversary like the Chinese J-20 in open combat, the shadow boxing has already begun. Brief moments where American F-35s and Chinese J-20s have been in the same airspace. These are not dogfights, but data-gathering events. Two apex predators sniffing each other out in the dark. The American pilots report that the J-20 is a capable machine, professionally flown, but they also express a quiet confidence in the fusion that the F-35 provides. The drama here is the tension of the almost, the realization that these two machines are built for a war that everyone hopes will never happen, but for which both sides are furiously preparing. Every sensor, ping, every radar emission, every flight path is recorded, analyzed, and fed into the simulation banks, preparing for the day when the Cold War turns hot. In the end, the script of the F-35 Lightning II is a story of transformation. It began as a controversial, over-budget blueprint that promised to do too much for too many people. It was hated by the press, doubted by the public, and scrutinized by the government. But through the crucible of testing and the fire of its early combat deployments, it has emerged as exactly what it promised to be: a quarterback in the sky, a machine that doesn't just win fights, but manages the entire battlefield. It is a weapon that has fundamentally changed the psychology of pilots, who now fly with the confidence of knowing they can see through storms, see in the dark, and see through the enemy's eyes. The drama is no longer about whether the F-35 works. The drama is about what happens to the unfortunate soul who finds themselves on the wrong side of the glass cockpit, staring at a blank radar screen while a missile they never saw coming closes the distance at Mach 4. The Lightning II has ceased to be just a plane. It has become a presence, a dark inevitability in the modern sky, watching, processing, and waiting.